All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Papillion La Vista Community Schools Board of Education meeting. Before we actually start the meeting, we have a student fees hearing. So we'll start that here. Item number 1, call to order, Pledge of Allegiance, please. All right, thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Here. Ms. Fisher. Here.
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 Thank you very much. Please take notice of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act posted at the entrance to the room. And with that, we have our student fees hearing. Purpose of the hearing, review the amount of money collected from students pursuant to the use of waivers as provided in policy 3307, student fees for the 2022-23 school year, and to hear support, opposition, criticism, suggestions, or observations of taxpayers relating to any recommended changes, and a summary of fees to be collected relative to the 23-24 school year. So after reading all that, Mr. Richards, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Good evening, everybody. As part of the hearing, we'll review the 22-23 fee waivers provided to our students this year. As you can see, we had free and reduced counts are about 26% elementary, 28% middle school, and we're up to about 25% now at our high schools. The number of waivers that were requested by the students, you can kind of see that. 847 at the elementary level, 463 at the middle school level, and 441 at the high school level. So we are doing a pretty good job. We discussed this in the subcommittees a little bit of getting the word out that the fee waivers are available, and we'll continue to try to do that with our students that are in need of those waivers. Fee waiver history, you can kind of see where COVID hit a little bit. They started to decrease, and then last year they started going back up again at each the elementary, junior high level. This past year we were at 847 at the elementary, 463 the junior high, and 441 at the high school. So coming back up to probably back to normal from where we were coming off of COVID. Student fee accounts for the year. Middle school, all 3 middle schools involved in this had a revenue of $176,688. High school level, we had a revenue of $824,841. The expenses at each school, middle school, and this does not include the encumbrances they have already for next year, getting ready for next year. So you got balances at each middle schools and the high school fee accounts, but mostly they're staying within, the free fee range, which you like to see. Changes we're going to suggest for 23-24. We know there's inflation and everything else, but we want to be real considerate to our taxpayers. The lunch fund is still doing really well because of the federal reimbursements amounts that they're given, but those are temporary still. And we expect those to continue into 23-24, so we're only recommending a 5-cent increase on the lunch side. Breakfast will stay the same as 22-23, and then all other fees will be froze for this year as well on recommendations. I don't have the handout for you, but we still remain some of the our director's out of town, so I didn't get the exact for 23-24 yet. I still have 22-23. We're still the lowest in the metro lunch prices by about 15 cents. So that continues to be good news for our patrons and the board, I think, at this point. So I'll share that sheet as soon as she gets back with the 23-24 prices. Any questions?
For the form, for the free and reduced form, do they have to fill it out at the beginning of the year, or say, can they do it in the middle or whenever? Yeah,
they can do it at any time during the year that they think they may qualify. So if they forgot to do it at the beginning of the year, they can fill it out in October or whenever. Great question.
The activity fees those were the activity fees you mentioned. Those are collected at the ball games and things like that. Or is that different?
The activity fees at the beginning of the year for $70 for our high schools to participate in the activities. Those are collected usually at the beginning of the school year as best as possible. And then, of course, if a student decides they want to play a winter sport and they haven't paid the activity fee yet, they can pay it at that time.
I guess my question is to help the public understand the difference between an activity fee versus general budget, that the activity fee is separate and can only be used for activities and cannot supplant district funding.
Correct. And that's, that's kind of the complications of a school district budget. The activity fund is over here, and then the student fee fund is over on this side. So actually, all the student fees stay in the student fee fund, and then you have the activity fund. All the activity fund fees where they fundraise and things like that stay over here. So it's all separated and different from the general fund, which is the taxpayer fund you're talking about.
If someone qualifies for the free and reduced, and then for the activity card, do they get that for free, or do they have to pay for that?
Yeah, that's considered a student fee.
Okay.
So if they qualify for free lunch, they would get a free activity ticket for the year.
Okay.
If they qualify for reduced, then they get the reduced rate that they qualify for
Okay.
off of that fee.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, and we don't have any public comment. So if nothing further, then I will adjourn the student fees hearing at 6:07 p.m. All right, now we will call to order the regular Board of Education meeting. We've already done item 1 with the Pledge of Allegiance and roll call. Should all still be here. So with that, we'll jump down to number 2, communications, and item A, recognition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey, members of the board. For our members of the community that are here in attendance this evening, thank you for being here. And for our members that are watching on YouTube, thank you for engaging with your community and your Board of Education. For our frequent watchers of board meetings, you know that this is something we try to do once a month, sometimes twice a month, depending on as the need arises. But we try to do some type of recognition of both staff and students who have provided some type of recognition from themselves, their school or their school district. It tends to slow down a little bit during the course of the summer months for obvious reasons. We don't have as many activities going on. But by happy coincidence, we actually have 2 this evening, and one's a student and one's a coach, and in both cases they're really pretty remarkable. As always, what we'll do is I'll read the first one. They'll be recognized by their Board of Education. That individual can come down and be recognized. We'll take a couple of pictures, and then I'll come back and I'll provide the second recognition for the evening. So the very first one is the Omaha World Herald 2023 Girls Coach of the Year. I don't know how many of you are regular World Herald readers or subscribers, but this is always one of those things I look forward to reading about. There's always a designee for the male Coach of the Year. Went to Westside's football coach. Congratulations to him. He's done some wonderful things with the Westside program. And our own coach, Katie Tarman, was recognized from Papillion Vista South. In addition to winning multiple titles and fielding an incredibly competitive program, not just statewide, not just regionally, but nationally. Coach Tarman has guided this team to national rankings and has brought an already very prestigious program to new heights. But setting aside her accomplishments as a volleyball coach, she consistently produces outstanding citizens. And if you've met one of our volleyball girls, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're good, solid individuals who are getting it done in the classroom as well as on the court. And that's the mark of an outstanding coach. In addition to being an absolutely outstanding coach and human being, she is also an outstanding teacher of special education. And it is for this reason and many more that she was recognized as the Omaha World Herald Coach of the Year. Coach Tarman, come on down and be recognized by your Board of Education. If you didn't get a chance to read the World Herald article, it's pretty long and it's great, and it's as much about Katie and her family and her kids and how important family is to her as it is about her role as a teacher and a coach. So great article, Katie. We are incredibly proud of you. And our second honoree this evening is a student. We don't get many of these because this is equally prestigious. Gatorade provides recognition every year to a state player of the year in a particular athletic endeavor. And in this example, we have the 2023 Gatorade Nebraska Boys Track and Field Player of the Year, who is also from Papillion La Vista South, Mr. Caden Frederick, 2023 graduate. Caden has distinguished himself in all sorts of ways, again, not only on the field of play, but in the classroom. He's an outstanding student, but also won back-to-back state championships in the boys discus 2022, 2023, and will end up throwing the shot and disc for South Dakota State next fall. So he's going to continue to take his talents to the collegiate level. I didn't see Caden is back there. Caden, we are incredibly proud of you. Please come on down and be recognized by your Board of Education.
Congrats, Katie.
Caden, we're incredibly proud of you. Don't forget to come back and visit us. We hope you do well up at South Dakota State next fall. And with that, Mr. Bailey, members of the board, I would conclude our recognitions for the evening.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, it's always good stuff. Next up, item B, public comments for items not on the agenda. We have some of those tonight. Please remember, when I call upon you coming up to the front, please state your name and address, and then you shall have 3 minutes. Kathy will start the timer, and again, the first beep's about 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and then we'll have the second one at 3 minutes, and then you'll be done. I will stress again, part of our procedure 8420, I don't want anybody, I don't need laughing, heckling, anything else like that. Please be polite and realize that everybody can have a say here, and please let them do that. If you do decide to do that, I will give you one warning, and then the second one I will ask you to leave. So let's don't really want to do that, so let's try to maintain a polite meeting here. And with that being said, we'll start off with Ms. Lisa Kuchenmeister. She's hiding back over there.
Lisa Kuchenmeister, La Vista. I am here tonight to demand that current board member Brittany Holtmeyer publicly denounce the hateful extremist groups that have endorsed her and that she's a part of. Brittany, I ask for you to denounce Protect Nebraska Children and denounce Nebraska Freedom Coalition, who calls our teachers groomers and state that the worst form of indoctrination is found in our schools. Lastly, Brittany, I'm calling for you to denounce Moms for Liberty, which you are a member of, and stop all association with them immediately. Moms for Liberty is absolutely an extremist organization. They have called for LGBTQ students to be segregated, taught in different classrooms from straight and cisgender students. They campaign for book bans against books they do not agree with, something Brittany has said as a board member. Members of Liberty has offered bounties to anyone who catches a teacher promoting CRT in their classrooms. They repeatedly call librarians, teachers, and parents who defend material as groomers, a very statement that Brittany has again used. Members of this have been indicted for terroristic threats, saying that they would gun down a school librarian. Moms for Liberty quoted Hitler in a recent newsletter, inciting fears, stating if the government has control over our children today, they control our country's future, so stop letting public schools indoctrinate your kids. Let me share some personal experience with the Brit Clan. Brittany, did you know that your supporters have yelled at me during public events? Brittany, you have had family members scream at me and others, including teachers, right out there in the parking lot, completely unprovoked. Brittany, are you proud that one of your vocal supporters chased out after me following a board meeting, confronted me, and this encounter required a police officer to get involved so I could leave? Brittany, are you encouraging your online clan to call my husband and others who support schools and librarians pedophiles? Lastly, Brittany, please pass along to that same family member of yours that she needs to stop her online harassment. I know exactly what account she is hiding behind, and she said, I should not be allowed around children. Do you find this funny? My lawyer sure doesn't. It's called defamation. You should be ashamed and embarrassed for being associated and related to these people. Is it really what you want to be remembered for? You are on that side of the table now, and you have obligation to board ethics. Refuse to surrender to these special interest groups. You are a slave to these hateful extremist groups. Everything you've said and done comes right from their playbook. But my guess is Brittany will do exactly what her Moms for Liberty masters have taught her. Never, ever apologize. So to Dr. Rickley and the other board members, will you compromise with these extremists? For the last few years, the same group has been a thorn in your side. Your staying quiet and attempting to compromise has gained you nothing. It is time to shut them down and make procedures that will stop their attacks. These people have an agenda, and it is not to protect our children. Do not compromise with extremists. Do not compromise with these extremists. Do not, I repeat, compromise with extremists. That is exactly what they are.
Okay, next up, Mr. Edward Weniger.
Edward Weniger, my address is on the form. This week, a movie came out, The Sound of Freedom, and while I personally have not seen it yet, I do intend to go and encourage all of you and anybody listening to go see Sound of Freedom in the movie theater. I can still, just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean I can't talk on the subject. I have some knowledge of that topic. But I want to point out that the stuff that is in the libraries, the books, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Children being sex trafficked, groomed, and enticed online. This is all the end point of something that starts with little children's books with rainbows on the covers that are in elementary schools in Papillion La Vista Public or Community School District. This is the stuff that Nebraskans for Freedom, Moms for Liberty, great and strong groups like that are advocating for our children. This is all what they're fighting against, is the end goal of stopping kids. We see it basically every year here in College World Series time, that there's a huge influx of trafficking, of kids being taken advantage of, and this is what groups like that fight against and are working to fight against. This past week, there was a kid in North Carolina, a transgender kid, who went to meet with a man that he had met online and was murdered. And again, that is what we're fighting to avoid and stop. I won't say it all. I will say a large part of it starts with the content of the media and entertainment and books that is being absorbed by these children. Certainly parental involvement is important, but when we try to get involved, as you've seen here week after week, it seems like we're constantly fighting an uphill battle with the school board to protect the children against stuff like this. I'm looking forward to talking to Lisa Kuchmeister and her group about setting up an event in the future concerning the online safety, text messaging, and sexting. I think that is important, and we hope to have that as a future event coming up. So thank you very much.
All right, next up, Mr. David Metcalf.
Hey, what's going on? I'm David Metcalf. I live.
Here we go. There you go.
Oh, I pick it up, and okay. Thank you so much. I had one part I was going to read, but I didn't put it on the sheet with what I was going to say, so I want to stay true to my agenda and actually, because I don't want to be misleading and everything. So mine was books. That's what I wrote down, books. So I'll skip this first part. But I was raised not to raise hell about the issues unless you had a solution, and I believe that to this day. I was also raised not to cuss in front of kids, and I believe that to this day. With the books, and that's been causing the commotion, I only got involved with it in like about February. I started coming to these meetings and everything. But in this specific situation, concerning like the boy blue book that gentleman read here at one of the meetings, I really don't believe they belong in schools with kids under 18 years old. Honestly, I don't know all the ins and outs to fix the problem, but I know there are some people that were elected to this board that know a way of getting these books out of the school. In this situation, it is moral to raise awareness to this issue in hopes that someone on this board will find a solution. Do you know any child psychologist of the same political party as you? Ask them their thoughts on that. We'll use that one specific book as an example. I follow this Facebook group. It's called Gays Against Groomers. I don't know a whole lot about the group, but just the title alone attracted me to it. The title alone, just the concept of a large group of gay people coming together to stand up and say, hey, like there's some things that we need to work on that we need to tweak. And 30 seconds, okay. Sexual material such as the boy blue book belongs in the bedroom or an 18+ section of like a bookstore, not our schools, 1,800 schools. Got one more thought. I'm asking the board to put this book on a 2-week time frame because that's all the time it should take for a school board to be able to remove a book once a member of our community literally read the material out loud for all of us to hear at a board meeting. I was here and I know who was in attendance for that meeting.
All right, next up, Ms. Linda Vermuden.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Linda Vermuden. So I want to review a couple of facts for you tonight. A lot of what I heard at the first meeting I was at was opinions touted as fact. Fact has to be proven and scientifically verified. So fact, Nebraska statutes clearly define what pornography is. This is an objective data, it's a legal issue. They also clearly define what obscenity is. There's no wiggle room in that. The gentleman just before me actually made part of my case when a community member came and read to this board out of a book, and one of the board members objected by saying, that is pornography. That is true. And that book was in the library. So my concern is, why do we still have these books in our library if we know it meets the pornographic obscenity law requirements? If I take any one of these books, fact, and I hand them to any of you board members, for example, I'm arrested on the spot for the distribution of pornography. So how is it that parents are entrusting this board to protect their children, and yet in a place that should be the safest place, it's becoming a dangerous place because the majority of parents aren't even aware of these books. And I think that's why a lot of them are not here to speak. I wasn't aware of this until a few months ago. So let me talk to you about some of the long-term effects of pornography. It physically changes the structure of the brain of a child. This is a fact, anatomically proven. And as a psychologist, I'm well aware of the long-term effects on that. My area of expertise is working with children that have been sexually abused and individuals that have been raped. So I'm well aware of the long-term effects on that individual and lifelong struggles that they have. When a child is exposed to pornography early in life, it leads to addiction. Addictions are hard to deal with, so you're going to fill up the offices of clinical psychologists and counselors for decades because exposure to this early on in life sets down a pattern in their brain which is difficult to change. So we need to be aware of what we're doing when we say, okay, we're going to have this in place. So I'd strongly urge you to reevaluate all the books that you have to say, if any of these meet this criterion, should we have those in our library? Because they are readily available online and in public libraries for those parents that would like their children to have access. But as a taxpayer, I object to tax dollars being utilized for this kind of material that carries really no literary value, but the damage it does is lifelong. And the suicide rates are skyrocketing and the depression rates are skyrocketing as a result of this. Thank you for your time.
All right, next up, Ms. Carrie George.
Okay, sorry. Being a teacher, my district or my address is on the form. Yes, Carrie George.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I am a school teacher, PLEA member, and I am speaking as an individual. I want to thank the community members who have taken their time to provide positive feedback to our school district. I also want to thank the board for regaining decorum at these meetings. As teachers, we are role models for our students, and it is important for our students to know how to respectfully disagree with individuals without calling out in the middle of someone speaking. Next, I would like to be clear that I am a proud product and parent of private and parochial schools, but also a proud public school teacher. Our family is very much for school choice, but LB 753 is not the way to accomplish this school choice. It is a tax scheme that does indeed take away funding from public schools, as well as other services provided by the state that are funded by tax dollars. The creator of the bill has even threatened the school funding that was passed by the legislation if LB 753 is repealed. The petition initiative is to put the issue on the general ballot in 2024 for voters to have a say in how and where their tax dollars are spent. To note, Nebraskans have voted no 6 times in the past to vouchers and voucher schemes. There is also overwhelming evidence of the harm vouchers have done in other states, and Nebraska has been wise to say no. As it stands now, LB 753 creates a scholarship organization that takes 10% of the donations for their services in distributing these scholarships. The donations do not go directly to eligible schools or students. The bill does not account for many rural schools that do not have private schools. This bill is not about competition for students, as some have said. It is a tax scheme that is not in the best interest of all the students across the state of Nebraska. To conclude, this is not about teachers being offended. This is about teachers wanting the best education for students, same as many parents, the choice that my family has made. LB 753 is a tax scheme for those it benefits and not an opportunity for students.
Okay, next up, Ms. Vicki Fuller.
I just got bifocals, so I'm still trying to learn how to read with them. My name is Vicki Fuller. My address is on the sheet. I'm here to talk about positivity, good things, bring smiles, hopefully. If you want to put kids first, then do it. Be involved at your kids' school. Get to know the staff, not just the teachers. I have 2 kids at Parkview Heights. I'm the treasurer of the PTO. I'm on the PBIS committee. when the call came out in the spring of 2021 that the district was short-staffed, I applied to be a food service sub. Serving lunch to elementary kids is really fun. I really recommend doing it, honestly, it's a joy. During Staff Appreciation Week this past May, I was in the staff lounge doing some cleanup. The head custodian was in there on his break. And I tell you, Mr. Joe at Parkview is amazing with the kids. During our conversation, he mentioned that until then, he hadn't realized that I had a full-time job because I'm at the school so often. I told him that I told my manager that most of the time, my kids and things at school are more important than my work. I know not everybody's that fortunate to have a job that they can do that, but I am. I know that parents can still be involved. They can show up to the events at school. They can go to PTO meetings. They can show up for their parent-teacher conferences, pay attention to the school board meetings, read your emails from your school and your teacher. I also want to say that my kids are very fortunate to attend a Title I school. I know some people don't like that. I love it. Having the extra staff at our school has been wonderful, and they support all of the kids, not just the Title I kids. They support all the kids that need it. And I know I submitted a gratitude comment. I don't remember what you guys called that last year, but I want to make it public. I want to say thank you to our principal, Randy Guffmiller. When my daughter was having behavior issues in 2021, Randy was the first person to say, "Have you thought that maybe your daughter has ADHD?" I had not even thought about that. Because of him, he was able to get the staff on board with treating her as if she had ADHD before we even got the diagnosis, which took 5-6 months to get. We now have a positive diagnosis, we now have medication, and she was able to graduate from her check-in sheet last year. She had several days of 100%, which was amazing for me. And I'm so grateful to Randy. I also want to just conclude with teachers and staff need our support more than ever. We're losing too many teachers to other careers, and we need to support them any way we can. And in reference to a comment made last time, cameras in the classroom are not the way to do that at all. We have a great school district, and I'm very proud of us. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public comment on items not on the agenda. We'll move to item C, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bailey, members of the board. Again, thank you for our community members for being here this evening. Always appreciate your presence. First and foremost, want to belatedly wish everyone a happy Independence Day. All district buildings and offices were closed in observance of the holiday, but hopefully everybody had an opportunity to spend some time with family and friends, and sounded like a war zone in my neighborhood for about 4 or 5 days straight, and the Rickley cats were a little bit worked up, but that is our right as an American. So hopefully you had some opportunity to catch up with family and friends. Doesn't seem possible that we're already talking about this, but we are starting to bring back some of our staff that don't work continuously on year-round contracts. I believe Dr. Settles has new teachers coming in on Thursday. We have a group of approximately 100 teachers, which is very typical. Typically between 90 and 100 teachers is about what we bring on every single year due to replacements, due to retirement, resignations, things of that nature. So we're really excited about the fresh crew of teachers we'll be bringing in later this week. And our administrators who aren't on year-round contracts, some of them are, some of them are not, come in later this month as well, culminating with Administrator Days, which is always in Kearney later this month. August 10th is the very first day of classes. Hopefully that is on your calendar. It is exactly 1 month from today. More information to come as we get a little bit closer. The back-to-school ads will be hitting the mailboxes any days now, and we'll hear a collective groan from our parents and students when that happens, I'm sure. Just a reminder to our board, we do have our retreat scheduled, including the time, July 31st, which is our 5th Monday. It is 4 to 8 p.m. The community is welcome to attend that event. It will be here at our central office. Just as a reminder to our community, we do not take action on any items at any board retreat. The purpose of the retreat and what differentiates it from a regular meeting is there are no action items. We discuss a lot. Typically we have between 4 and 5 agenda items to discuss. I would assume we'll talk about some things related to strategic planning, to the upcoming bond initiative, school safety, and a variety of other things that the board has identified as priorities, but that's fast approaching. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to Buildings and Grounds. The projects from the 2018 bond are largely wrapped up, and we're starting to think about phasing in the bond projects from the 2023 bond. And I know we're making some rapid progress, wrapping up some of those progress, including some irrigation playground projects at 5 of our elementary buildings. So that'll be a nice enhancement for 5 of our buildings as they open their doors this fall. Lastly, it's a little bit out of order, but I think it's worthwhile given the circumstance. Many of you probably are aware that Lieutenant Ray Higgins recently passed. In fact, his memorial's over at the Methodist Church until 8 o'clock tonight. The memorial service is tomorrow. They'll be lining the streets saying goodbye to him tomorrow. He was a grad, and he also provided security. And for those of you that stuck around after meetings, you know that he was always quick to come up and slap you on the back and say hi and ask about your kids and ask what was going on in your world. And the world lost a good human being. So Godspeed to Ray, and keep his family and family in your thoughts and prayers. And with that, Mr. Bailey, I'd conclude my superintendent's comments for the evening.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to say something as well, but definitely the world lost a terrific human being. All right, item D, board reports.
I went down to the YMCA today. Kaylee Bowen was down there. She's the director of the teammates. And I asked her if she wanted me to share anything, so she did. She sent me an email for some stuff to share for teammates. The mission is to positively impact the world by inspiring students to reach their full potential through mentoring. Teammates is offered in our school district for middle and high school students. Mentors strive to meet with their students at the school once per week, ideally, or at least 20 times per school year. PLCS currently has over 25 students waiting for a mentor, and those who are interested in mentoring or have questions can contact Kaylee at Kaylee, it's Kailey, period, Bowen, Bowen, at plcschools.org. So she just wanted me to share that with the people. They're looking for, hopefully, to get some mentors before school starts for those 25 kids. And then just another thing, we had our building grounds and finance meeting, and then my son attended the basketball camp at Monarchs. So it's cool, once again, to have him do that and run up and down the same court that I did.
Teammates, that's a great program, and definitely we need to get that word out. We need more mentors, so appreciate that.
On June 29th, I attended a delicious glass of lemonade when I joined the HR team at the Papillion City Park and welcomed several of our patrons who stopped by to ask questions about working for the district. It was a great way to visit in a casual setting and enjoy some lemonade and cookies, and to learn about and even get an interview for positions such as paraprofessional, food service worker, custodian, van driver, or van rider. The group hatched a plan to carry on with these events. And so now they've dubbed themselves as the Lemonade Squad. And the HR team plans a week of lemonade stand hiring fairs starting July 17th in neighborhood schools throughout the district. So if you want to be a part of the team, or if you want to go check it out, you can search PLCS Lemonade on Facebook or contact the central office for the locations and times. It was a really casual and enjoyable moment. Thank you.
There we go. All right, anyone else? Is that all we got? I know it's summer, so it's a little bit slower, so. All right, thank you. Item E, we'll move on to committee reports. First, Buildings, Grounds, and Finance.
Yes, we met last Friday morning. It's a pretty extensive agenda. One of the items is obviously on the agenda for this evening. We'll discuss, and then obviously the review of the Policy 7000 series construction kind of flows through our group as well. Majority of our discussion on Friday revolved around kind of the bond 2023 timeline, some of the projections we're starting to get, discussions with the architects, and then most importantly, getting our CMR process off the ground that we've approved to start. So we're getting some committee selections outside of the Building Grounds and Finance group that are required by the state statute. So we're progressing with that and getting some interview times. Proposals are due back from the CMRs July 25th. So, and then we'll set up interviews with the required committee shortly after that, with those that we invite back for interviews. Again, as Dr. Rickley mentioned, just some of the 2018 bond projects wrapping up and some other facility updates. We obviously have the student fees hearing. We discussed those fees in our meeting as well. Started talking a little bit about preliminary budget items and numbers and where we're kind of looking based on some projections. More to come on that over the summer. And then just discussing moving forward with our improvements at Fricky Field now that we have the long-term lease approved with the city. So the architects have already been working for weeks. Would love to get that project started after the Legion baseball season wraps up here in August, to try to have it ready for spring ball. So that was it. We'll be meeting in August next. Told you we had a long agenda.
Thanks, that's good. Human Resources and Student Services.
Our committee has not met, but we are working on coordinating calendars for a meeting on the 19th or 20th.
Okay, thank you very much. And finally, Curriculum and Americanism.
We did meet last week. Mr. Richards jumped into our meeting and provided a little bit of updates for our group for just the student fees and the CRM, which is on the agenda tonight. But the main focus of our meeting was around our 6,000 Board of Education policy review. We had a lot of discussion, went through all the recommended changes or the submissions from other individuals about potential changes, and a lot of discussion around the 6405. We do have the review of the policy 6,000 under a discussion item this evening.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move into action items. First item is action by consent.
Motion to approve the action by consent as presented.
Second.
All right, a motion made by Ms. Fisher and a second by Mr. Madler. Any comments, discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you very much. Second item is the board meeting minutes of June 26th, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of June 26, 2023 as presented.
Second.
All right, thank you very much. A motion made by Mr. Lotus and a second by Mr. Madler. Any comments? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you very much. The last item under action items is the City of La Vista interlocal agreement for softball field. Mr. Richards.
Thank you. I'm going to recommend that the board go ahead and table this item to a future date. We have a few language changes that didn't match what we kind of talked about as an agreement at this point. Both great well-intended things out of both sides, but we need to get it cleaned up a little bit after discussing that with the city manager today. Probably there's no big hurry in getting this done since that project probably won't need to begin until spring. So we'll probably bring that back in August for the board to review. We want to run it by the Buildings and Grounds and Finance Committee as well before bringing it back to the entire board.
I'll make the motion to table this item to be brought back for consideration at a later meeting.
I will second.
Okay, I had a motion by Mr. Madler to table this until a later meeting and a second by Mr. Lotus. Any comment, any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Yep, we'll table this to a later date. Thank you, Mr. Richards. All right, we'll move on to section 4. We do have some items for items on the agenda for public comment, and so again, what I'd like to do is I'll go ahead and it's all, I think they're all for policy 6,000. And so what I'll do is I will go ahead and I will have those people come up and make their comments, and then we will go into our discussion is the plan. So again, reminder, when you come up, please state your name and address, and then you will have 3 minutes. And again, I know this is obviously a very charged policy. Please keep your comments to yourself. And again, I will give you a warning if I hear something, and second time I'll ask you to leave. So let's try not to do that. We did a good job on the first section here, so let's do the same here. With that being said, first up is going to be Ms. Linda Vermuden.
Good evening again. My name is Linda Vermuden. So my address is just to talk a little bit about the proposed change on the pronouns. When we make a proposal, you always have to ask the question, what's behind the proposal? Because no proposal just comes out of nowhere. There's a history behind that, and it might be interesting for us as public to kind of know what the history has been with you all through that process before you've arrived at this juncture. My concern also is just from the standpoint of English expertise. When we begin to change from personal pronouns to collective pronouns, it can pose a lot of confusion when you come to the classroom and now you're trying to teach people the difference between he and his and her, she and her, and them and they. And for hundreds of years, it's been clearly understood in our society that if you're looking at a lady, it would be her and she. If you're looking at a gentleman, it would be he and him. But if I'm looking at a group, we would say, well, they went to the meeting, or, I went with them to the meeting. So it's a clear delineation as to a function, not per se a title of somebody based on any other kind of identity. And so that would just be my concern, that we just kind of keep that in mind as we come in to teach literature and English, that this does not pose a level of confusion to people that are not aware in the classroom of what's going on and what is behind this agenda, because clearly there's always an agenda behind something like this. It doesn't just come out of a vacuum. So that was all my comment that I wanted to raise. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Next up, Mr. Edward Weniger.
Edward Weniger, my address is on the form. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what Linda spoke on earlier as we fight to keep porn out of our school libraries. I want to talk specifically about the role that pornography has played in the lives of serial killers. And I believe it was Encyclopedia Britannica, was talking about how some of the names that were brought up in terms of the role that pornography played in the lives of people like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Richard Ramirez, and John Wayne Gacy. For all of them, porn was a factor. Specifically, Bundy referred to his own addiction saying, "Like an addiction, you keep craving something harder, which gives you a greater sense of excitement until you reach a point where the pornography only goes so far." And to reiterate, this is where we're starting our kids out in elementary school, accessing this type of material through junior high and through high school, and then wondering why people like that turn out in the world the way they do. We should be inclusive as possible in our own definition of what is unacceptable for our children to access, and the highest common denominator should be our goal, rather than the lowest common denominator, which seems to be the current bar for our libraries. Somebody at some point made a moral decision to put these books in the library, and your job as school board members is to make the moral decision to protect our kids from that threat. And the threat of following in the footsteps of these men. The first place I ever accessed porn was in the Papillion Public Library at the age of 10. So this stuff happens, this is personal for me, and I hope you'll make the right decisions as we consider Series 6000 and solving this problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Last up is Mr. Michael Kuchenmeister.
Michael Kuchenmeister, La Vista. My address is on the form. Wow, serial killers and sex trafficking are born from libraries. That is a new one. But anyway, first I'd like to thank those on the board, with one obvious exception, Britt, and those in our administration for the courage they've shown recently in the face of attacks on our district and students from extremists both inside and outside the district. It's been refreshing. So most of you, keep your spirits up and please continue working to defend our students' educational experience. As a parent in the district, I can't tell you how much I appreciate so much of what I've been seeing recently. But as much as I appreciate what I've seen so far, I strongly believe we need to do more than just react in what sometimes feels like a half-committed manner when things have already gone too far. We need to strengthen it. We should not be viewing demands from extremists as something to be compromised with. We should not be cowering to book burners, bigots, conspiracy theorists, and opportunistic grifters. We shouldn't be jumping to react in ways that legitimize extremists' endless complaints about how not everybody shares their fringe ideology. Feeding the monster, we hope, will magically go away. We should recognize it for what it is, attacks designed to weaken our education system. And while our district can't label the individuals responsible for these attacks as anti-PLCS, I sure can and I will. I'm sure these attacks aren't going to stop, and the methods used to attempt to weaken us will shift over time, as we've already seen over the last few years. We need to hold strong. Our district isn't even unique in this. Pick a city on the map of the U.S. and you'll likely find a nearby district who is being attacked in nearly identical ways. This isn't by chance. So to help us from becoming a victim, a statistic in this battle to dismantle public education, I'm encouraging you to take a more aggressive approach to actively build new layers of protections for our district, its staff, and most importantly, our students. All our students. All. Do not hesitate out of fear. That's exactly what they want. That is literally in the playbooks of certain extremist groups most of these attacks are coming from, along with recommendations of ways to drain our district resources, such as bonds for the win, or as we've been seeing this year, literally dumping a list of books into our book review process that were clearly not personally read by the committees. Intimidation tactics like harassment in parking lots, defamation online, threatening email should not sway us from doing what's right for our students and staff, right? Our book review process is a good one, but it's clearly been abused. Those who wish to harm our public education system have found a vulnerable target in this process, so let's close it. Take every measure you can to cover this gap in our armor, to prevent such blatant abuse, and to prevent this drain on our district's resources. Do not allow extremists a single foothold, no matter how much they try to repackage their vile intentions with prettier sounding but largely disingenuous language. Please help lead our state by example. I love our district, I love our community. Now let's show Nebraska just how great we truly can be. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, Ms. Siri, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, good evening, Board of Education. I'm going to refer to the board packet agenda that you have in front of you. As you know, we have been working on changes to the 6000 series of board policies. These board policies center around instruction. And basically tonight there are 5 recommendations that have come through multiple subcommittee meetings that you can see there at the top for recommended changes to this series. This is for discussion only tonight, and if we are ready, the next board meeting I'll bring them forward for a decision by the board. So the first one, as you can see there, is 6104, and this one centers around unplanned, I'm going to use that terminology, school closings. This is an update to the language. It used to be just focused on weather, but as you know, the last few years we've had to call off schools due to a water main break. We had an air conditioning issue at one of our high schools when it was, let's just say, rather balmy. Then, of course, you know, we've had some health considerations in the past as well. So it's really just an update to the language from inclement weather to school closing. The other thing is we also had it denoted in the policy that the announcements would be made over selected media. That is outdated, and so we're making the recommendation that that sentence be removed Our families and parents of the district receive notification by email, text, as well as media, but it's not just media. The second one then is 6202. This board policy focuses on multicultural, and this is really just an update to the language and grammar. This was a recommendation that came through. The identified groups that are outlined in this board policy align with Rule 10, but it's really taking the recognition of all other ethnic and cultural groups that was previously at the end of the sentence and putting it in the middle and then listing the specific groups. The third one is 6305, and this centers around students that have a need for special services through a 504 plan. Again, this is an update to the language. The original language talked about a student qualifying, and students really don't qualify. They're either eligible or not eligible. So again, this would update that language. The next one then is 6405. This is our board policy that focuses on controversial issues. This had several changes. The first one is the policy just stated parent, so we're adding the word guardian there. We are also denoting that the parent and guardian of a PLCS patron or parent can be eligible to deploy this policy if they would like. If they would like to have a curriculum issue reconsidered. So we added PLCS and we added the word guardian there. We also updated the language because they're asking for it to be reviewed for consideration of removal. And then if you scroll down to the next part towards the bottom, I believe it's the last paragraph of the board policy. It did state that in spite of all possible precautions, we took that out because precautions have been taken. And we capitalized, starting the sentence with parents again, of current PLCS students that is impacted by the decision for that portion. And then the last part you can see there is that we are adding a sentence that says this includes encouraging the parent or guardian to utilize the ability to opt out of any objectionable material. And that's just a reminder that parents have a right. They have, especially specific to library books, they can contact their librarian through their building principal. They can also see what their student has checked out through the app, as well as look up any of the resources via the website through the Follett. And then specific to things that are tied directly to the guaranteed and viable curriculum, obviously a parent can always reach out to their principal, and we often have identified alternate resources for whatever that parent has a concern with, whether it be a novel or an activity. And so we really just wanted to note that as well. And then the last part is we added PLCS in front of the word parent guardian shall have a right to appeal. So again, to denote. So that is the end of the changes to 6405. And then the last one is 6801. This particular policy focuses on conducting research in the district, and this was just simply a title update. Our former title was the Director of Research, Assessment, and Evaluation. That's just a name change to that position. It is now just simply titled the Director of Assessment. And so that is just an update so that the two titles match. And that is the recommendations of the 5 policy changes to the 6000 series.
All right, thank you very much. Any comments, discussion?
I just want to make the comment, there's been a lot of thought and effort that's gone into this. We've had several meetings about it, and I appreciate that in every one of them, you provided the comments to the side of different people, whether it was a patron, a parent, a school board member, or a staff member who had submitted suggestions. So we've had the opportunity to look at all of those, and I appreciate that you put them all out there for us to see. So we've gone through all of that, and the committee did come through and say that we feel comfortable at this point with the recommendations that have been made. However, if there are other board members that have any questions about that, I think certainly let us all know. But I think this is done. There's been a lot of time and effort spent on this, making sure that everybody's contributions or thoughts were considered throughout the process. So thank you for that.
I want to thank the subcommittee for all the time that you guys probably spent multiple meetings, I know, and all the suggestions going through, not just this policy, but all the 6,000s. So I appreciate that. I mean, the 6405, I mean, I've said previously that I think it was probably confusing with how it was written, or at least when I read it multiple times, just not clear. And I still worry that I'm worried that it's still not really clear on who can do what. So with that, maybe just a question. Does this change anything that we're doing right now on who can submit reviews?
Only in that it's very specific that it has to be a patron or parent of Papillion-La Vista Community Schools.
And you're considering patron as?
A taxpayer, someone who lives in the district, maybe does or does not have children currently enrolled.
Gotcha.
Or have ever had them enrolled.
Yeah, and I think because that's where it has it up there at the controversial items. It had previously had patron, we're still putting a PLCS patron now. And as I've said, I didn't think that had previously meant that any patron could submit something for review. Just because that paragraph, the way I've read it, it just defines what is controversial, an item that someone has an objection to. Now we are adding in to that they ask to be reviewed for consideration of removal. But that last paragraph is where I've always felt like the board policy was on who we allow to make those objections. And in that last paragraph, there's still nothing. It is still only parents, guardians. I mean, the second sentence, the superintendent is responsible for instructing the staff in the handling of complaints and formulating a complaint and appeal procedure for use by those parents, guardians who seek a review of the educational selections made by the district. And even the last one, PLCS parents, guardians shall have the right to appeal all the way to the Board of Education, which is where my confusion came from, since we started having the objections come in. That last one makes me think it's just parents, guardians, but here at the top, we're now defining it a little bit more to be reviewed for consideration. Should anything in that last paragraph be changed if you feel like it should be for PLCS patrons? Do we feel, because I read it and I don't see anywhere in that last part where it is patron.
Yeah, and we could do that if the board chose to do that. I believe that a patron could, anyone that is a member of the PLCS community could ask for something to be considered, to be reviewed, but ultimately a parent has the power to decide for their child. And that was also very explicit in the procedure, which, of course, the procedure would be updated once the board, if there were changes to the board policy. But that could be changed if that is what the board chose to do.
Shireen, I thought that section was for instructional only. It did not include library material.
At the top, it does state that the controversial item of any subject matter, instructional material, or library resource. Yeah. And that has always been that way. Yeah, that was not a change.
Yeah, but the bottom part just says educational materials, which we've defined previously as including library books, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, library material is often not a captive audience to speak. A student goes in and checks out a material, but they are all educational resources.
Yeah. So, because if I read, even with the proposed reviews, the way I read it, a PLCS patron may ask for something to be reviewed for consideration of removal, but that last paragraph tells me that the board is not instructing the superintendent to do anything with it unless they are a parent guardian.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, again, how I read it, and I know I voiced it previously, that's how I read it, and I still think if we want to clean it up, I say let's clean it up to make sure there is no confusion. Now, I will also say, personally, I think it should just be open to I like the last paragraph where it is the parents, guardians, and that sentence we're putting in there of a current PLCS student that is impacted by the decision. That would be where I think if we're going to clean it up and cut it down, I think I like that last paragraph better than that second one.
Okay.
And right now, I don't think they go together.
I can definitely understand your confusion. We definitely went round and round about that second paragraph, but I'll be honest with you, I think that, yeah, we didn't probably think through that. Part of this also that I think that we came up with a number of times is for the controversial issues, can't talk here, obviously right now it's very centered around library books, but a lot of this was written for curriculum. And so that's, while we were talking, I think later on, if someone has a problem, like if I don't like something that is in the curriculum, I can go to, the principal and talk about it, and there's ways so that it doesn't get to the whole process of eliminating it. I can sit there and say, I don't want my child to read this book in class, and then you can work with the teacher, work with the principal, and have a substitute book that can be read. Again, this is curricular books, not library books, and I think that's where part of this gets confusing, even though you're right, educational materials, just like she said, is around everything, but I think that's where I think we probably need to look at this again and figure out, hey, we said educational materials, and it either needs to be just PLCS parent or guardian or including PLCS patrons.
Yeah, and part of it is too, a lot of conversation centered around in the subcommittee, please feel free to correct me, but we didn't bring any recommended changes to 6401. That's our library selection policy. It is very explicit on how library books are chosen, what resources are used to identify the need, and also the deselection process, the selection process, and the maintenance of the collection itself. So it is very explicit as well. And so, Skip, you're right. We had a lot of conversations because this policy is more than just library books. It's trying to serve any issue that would be brought forward on a controversial reconsideration request. The library proposal, though, is very explicit to books, obviously, and that's 6401. So even though it's not here because it didn't have changes, it's tied to this because of that selection and deselection of books.
I was just going through and marking out some changes after reading what you guys had presented for us for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I printed off the current policy that we have the way that it was online. Mine is mainly more for like the procedures of 6405. In letter A, it says number 3, the use value of materials relevant to curriculum. I think on some of these words, we just need to be more specific and kind of clarify what it means, because it may mean one thing to you, but means something completely different to me. So underneath relevance, please identify the relevance of blah, blah, blah book, whatever book that they are wanting to be reviewed. Because this is, I don't know if you guys have, so this procedure 6405, it says complaint procedure for controversial education materials. That was letter A. And then under B, I think this one says if a parent's guardians wish that their child not use a certain material, the principal shall meet with the teacher and parents, guardians to work out an alternative. If it is not feasible, the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction or assignee may meet with all involved to reach a solution. Parents, guardians have the right to request that their child be excused from educational activities that conflict with parent, guardian, sincerely held religious beliefs or values. In this one, I feel like, to me, it's a little confusing. Even when I was looking at it at the beginning, like, is this curriculum or are we talking about like a library book?
So I think, Brittany, what's important to note here is that is procedure, and tonight we are just talking about policy.
Okay.
So the policy is the top part of that.
Right.
And the board has to make a determination on what they want their policy to be. And then you review the procedure, because the procedure is how you put the policy in place.
Okay.
And so tonight, it is just policy. So it's just the stuff above procedure on that document that you have in front of you.
So when will we go through the procedure then?
So the procedure, the district decides how they will put the policy into place once the board determines the policy.
Okay, got it. That makes sense then.
So that's why you just have the top half.
Right,
in the packet.
right, yeah, because when I was reading it, I was kind of confused, because normally it's like the full thing and then outline or crossed out and then underneath it, kind of like how Ms. Settles does that. But no, I do like how you put the PLCS parents, guardians, or PLCS patron, because taxpayers also have a say in this because they are paying their taxes. But other than that, I think the whole policy in itself looked pretty good. I just have some comments on procedures, and maybe we can meet and go over that.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Once the policy's voted
Set.
on. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, my comments are, start by addressing what we've heard over the past few months about book banning. The board has heard from patrons, parents, guardians, non-residents regarding the material available to students in our schools. The controversy of banning books has been debated for decades and even been the cause of violence in our history. These cases are the efforts of those who want to limit access to only those materials that they approve of. Is it really about the books, or is it the desire to control what our students have access to, because it doesn't stop at books? That's just a way to gain access to the system. We've heard national debates, not only over books, but gender equality, don't say gay, and other trends that frankly say to me that we are not making America free again, but returning to a less free, less equal time. Book banning in schools is the most widespread form of censorship in the United States, with children's literature being the primary target. Advocates for banning books, or certain books, fear that children will be swayed by their content. They commonly fear that these publications will present ideas, raise questions, incite critical inquiry among children and parents, political groups, or religious organizations that are not ready to address or that they find inappropriate. Opponents, those who oppose book banning, emphasize that the First Amendment protects students' rights to receive and express ideas. The Supreme Court in Board of Education of the Island Tree Union Free School District versus PICO in 1982, so this is decades old, ruled that public schools can bar books that are pervasively vulgar or not right for the curriculum, but they cannot remove books simply because they dislike the idea contained in those books. The decision called Libraries Places for Voluntary Inquiry and concluded that the school's board does not have discretion over the library, only the classroom. District Policy 6000 series provides options for parents who do not want their child to participate in certain curriculum that they find inappropriate, and it provides opportunity to limit material in the library if the parent or guardian makes that decision. I will support the policy as edited, although given the 1982 Supreme Court decision, I still have reservations about objections raised by patrons, parents, or guardians that would potentially limit material available to all students in our school library.
You guys, go ahead.
Just to kind of, and I don't want to preempt any board member, but it feels to me after listening to the board that there's at least two questions that we have to deal with here. And we're not going to take action tonight. We're set to discuss. We're not to take action until the next meeting at the very earliest. One question is philosophical. One question feels more practical. I think the philosophical question that this board has to struggle with is, do we feel like any patron, and to be crystal clear, patron is someone who lives in the Papillion La Vista Community Schools. You could be a grandpa, you could be a grandma, a mom, a dad, you could be an empty nester, you could never have had kids here, somebody that pays taxes here. That's how we're defining patron. Should anybody off the street have the ability to trigger our book review process? Or should it be somebody who has more of a stake in the process by having a child actively enrolled in our schools? And if you wanted to drill down even further, it's maybe, in some people's opinion, whether you agree with it or not, it's not enough just to have a student enrolled in Papillion La Vista Community Schools, but if you're going to object to Huck Finn and it's only available at the high school level, for example, and you have only elementary children, then it's probably not your place to object until you get to the high school level. That is a legitimate train of thought. But that's for the board to decide. That is not for the administration to decide. That's the philosophical question. Is it patron or is it parent? Reasonable arguments can be made on both sides, and the administration has weighed in with a recommendation. I think the second question is one that Mr. Madler identified. Once you have figured out whether it is patron or parent, then we want to make sure the language harmonizes, because I think there are some inconsistencies with the language, is what I think I heard Mr. Madler say. So it seems to me that we identify philosophically what we want to do, and then we can make the language align with that philosophical priority very easily. I do think one other thing, and Ms. Siri, please weigh in here, because curriculum materials get thrown around so casually, and I think for our community to understand, there's at least 3 levels of curricular materials that we routinely use, and as you go up the ladder, so to speak, the level of scrutiny increases. Let me give you some concrete examples. A teacher may choose to bring into his or her personal classroom library a book that they bought on Amazon, a book that they bought at a book fair, the book that they want to incorporate into their curriculum in some way, shape, or form. That level of scrutiny is very, very different than the second level, which would be a book that has been vetted through some processes outlined through policy, by the way, and selected by professionals, certified master's level librarians. That is a different level of scrutiny. That would be the second step on the ladder. And then the third step on the ladder would be the guaranteed and viable curriculum. That is now a captive audience. That is now a captive audience. A library book, I think we can all agree, whether you think this stuff is porn or not, you're not a captive audience. You can either pick up that book and check it out, or you can choose not to. That's the wonderful thing about living in a democracy. Guaranteed and viable curriculum is a creature of a different sort. If you're in that classroom, you are being exposed to that, and that level of scrutiny is the very highest, as I think we should all agree that if you are a member of that classroom, and you are now a member of that captive audience, the level of scrutiny should be the greatest at that level. So I just think that as we use those terms, words matter. And when we're talking about curriculum materials at a classroom library, where that book may or may not exist in other classrooms, even in the same building, as opposed to guaranteed and viable curriculum, where every student enrolled in that class, regardless of the building and the classroom, is going to receive that same dosage, so to speak, of the curriculum, that's a different level of scrutiny. Ms. Siri, did I adequately explain kind of how we interpret things?
Well done.
Thank you.
I have something to say with that, because I don't agree, but I feel like the patrons should be in there because, like you said, they are a taxpayer, and we just basically beg people for $130 million for a bond to help better our schools, even when those people don't have kids in the district. And I know myself, as it gets said 24/7, I don't have kids in the district, and either do a couple other people on this board, so then why are we making decisions, essentially, if we don't have kids, but yet here we are on the board? So it needs to make sense. So I believe that, yes, a patron, a taxpayer can have a say, but some random Joe that does not live in Papillion La Vista, I don't feel like they should be able to, because they are not paying into the school. But I do believe that taxpayers have a right to say where their money goes and how it's being spent. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a hard time when I'm looking at it on the resources that it takes then to support the review process. Ms. Erie, how many books have been submitted for review? Maybe 11 or?
Yeah, I think right now, you just recently?
Yeah, since April
I think
when
we're
we
at
started.
12, yeah. And I did have the committee keep track of their time, and it was anywhere from 8 to 12 hours for a committee member. That included not just reading the material, but also the meetings and the conversation that centered around making sure they understood the policy and what their job was and so on.
Yeah.
So, I think the hard part, and understand that there's been a lot of conversation around this, and I think everybody has looked at it at one point or another. They've been in this camp and then this camp, and then, but to Dr. Rickley's point, words matter, and I think, taxpayers absolutely have a lot of influence and say in what happens in our schools. There's opportunity for that when we adopt standards, or there's hearings for public comment. Even when we look at curriculum resources, we open that up to the community to come in and look and see. And I do think, the policy's explicit in the sense that a patron has that right. I think the hard part is do they have the right over a parent? And so they don't. And so this policy's trying to balance both of those. And I think, the board just does have to decide when it comes to asking for something to be reviewed. So they've had input on the curriculum, they've had input on those types of things, but when asking for something to be reviewed for reconsideration, what is the philosophy there?
Right. And any taxpayer, if it wasn't any taxpayer, anyone could come up and share their opinion in meetings. They can email us. They had other means to share opinions. And as a board member, trying to protect taxpayer dollars on making sure that the resources that we are allocating and the time that this district is spending and the staff is spending is high return use of those resources and the correct use of those resources. So we've had 12 submitted. How many are done? Recently, yeah, since like April. How many are we done with?
We've done 2 incomplete, and a third one is in process right now. And we're taking those in the order in which they were received.
Yeah.
And so the first 2 that were done were both novels. But we do have some books coming up that are not novels, so they will probably not take as long.
And any of those 12 yet from parents, guardians with kids that would be affected by the material?
Yes and no. We have parent, but not parent that has access to those materials.
So no
currently.
kids have access. That's the other part. If tomorrow we get a parent of a kid in an elementary school that is requesting a review of a library book in that kid's elementary school, with our current rate, you might not review it until that kid is into the next grade level. We've done 2 since April, and we got 10 left on the to-do list, and so this would be 13.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm just trying to weigh, I understand the other argument, let anyone submit it, but, as a board member, as I'm trying to figure out what is the best use of school district resources and what is best for the students in our district, I just have a hard time going with allowing any PLCS patron to submit that review and go through the same process that a parent of a kid that is actually affected and has access to the materials would go through. That's just where I am.
I would say that is a topic of conversation we've had in our committee meeting. How do we prioritize requests? Do we allow someone to just put in however many requests, whether their children are affected or not, and then set aside someone who has children in a particular grade level that they're questioning material for that grade level? So we've had quite a bit of conversation around that, Mr. Madler. So I do think you bring up an important point. This is very time consuming, and it may require some means of prioritization to be fair to those who are most affected by the request. So just something that we've had some conversation around.
I can tell you that part of that conversation was procedure oriented, and it related to the person submitting a request could not submit a second request until their first request is finished. That way it doesn't bugger up the system, and any parent who does have one can then put it in.
Will you share with the board and the community what books are being asked to be reviewed and just how the whole process is going? Kind of like the first one that you had shared. I know you said that you were just using that as an example, but that way people can be aware of what is being reviewed.
So right now, the way that it is, the system, as I shared at that board meeting where I went through the presentation, it's the complainant's right to know what it's not necessarily at this point public. So it's really between the complainant that puts in the request with the district. Now, if that complainant wanted to make it public, they could, but the district would not necessarily as part of that process right now.
Okay. So you can't even just share like the title without saying who made the complaint?
No.
No. Okay.
Not the way it currently is, not the current system.
Okay, but potentially it could be, you can share the book and why they're upset with it, but just not give a name, so you're not giving out their information?
That's not part of our current procedure.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
kind of.
Yeah. I think the hard part is you have to remember that right now you're specifically talking about library books, but this policy is written for anything. So you could have a family that felt maybe they had, I'm just making this up, this is not, but you could have a family that had been in a very traumatic situation and did not want their child to participate in a certain thing. Now, would that trigger this? No, it would probably be a conversation between the principal and but they may not want that to be disclosed publicly, and maybe even after it was done, that family might make a consideration of saying, hey, maybe consider a different book because this book, I don't know.
Okay.
So that's why, because it's really about serving students the best that we can.
Okay, because in that scenario, that wouldn't really be like a review, since a book review, since it's a child.
It maybe could be. Like you could read, okay, like for example, we've had a situation where we have a novel that's part of a guaranteed and viable, and the family had concerns. We made accommodations for that student. We went all the way, moved forward, but then at the end of the year, one of the individuals said, you know what, I want to fill this out because I think that you guys can do better in that book.
Okay.
So, but they didn't really want that public because it was very private as to what happened to their child. And, and you know, I said this in cabinet, and I hope I'm not overstepping, but this policy is really to make our instructional materials stronger. You know, it's a process that is in place to ensure that if people want something reconsidered and times change, and there's, I mean, Dr. Rickley used the example of Huck Finn. There's a lot of conversation around Huck Finn. It's a classic novel that's been taught for a long time, and but it you know, and it has a lot of, as far as American Lit goes, it is, you know, probably the biggest piece of that component. But it doesn't mean that there are individuals that don't think that it should be, and we need to reevaluate that and look at that. And at this point, you know, we've decided, yes, it's a very, very strong component of our curriculum, and it teaches those learning targets about what American literature looks like and what the author was trying to achieve through that, and so that's the idea behind it. So it's more than library books.
Sure. Thank you.
As it's currently written.
Okay.
I just want to say being part of the subcommittee, and we did have a lot of conversations about this, and I was exactly what Shireen said. I was first saying no, just parents and guardians, and I went back to patrons, and I actually do agree. They're taxpayers, and I believe that they should have the option to request to have something reviewed. I think currently we're looking at this under a very small microscope, and we have a couple of people that are trying to, you know, put in a whole bunch of books to cause this system to, you know, bog down. And that's, you know, that's what they're trying to do. I think, you know, again, it's procedure, but trying to change that procedure so that we can limit how that is done to, you know, to spread some of these out is what we need to do. And we need to look at this from a, as I call it, the 35,000-foot view, over time, is this what we want? Like I said, right now, it doesn't seem like, this is ridiculous because we have people out there that are doing this, that they don't have kids that are associated with that particular thing, but they are patrons. Whether or not they voted for the bond, they will be paying for that, bond along with the rest of us. And so in that case, I feel that they should have the right to do that. I believe, one, the teachers and the staff, the librarians, I believe in them. I believe in what they do. I do not believe in book banning. I think, everything that's going on right now is ridiculous. And I trust the teachers and the librarians that we have. So that being said, I still feel that, long term, that we need to allow patrons, PLCS patrons, those, again, I'm not willing to let someone from Millard or Omaha or whatever come in and consider this process. But I believe that looking at, like I said, from the big picture, that we need to allow PLCS patrons to be a part of it. I do think that, your comment, it was exactly right, and that's kind of what I wrote down, is once we figure out what we want to do, then we do need to clean up that paragraph, to make sure that it's, whether we clean it up to say X, Y, and Z for library books and this for curriculum, or whether we, so delineate those two, or whether we just make it, so that it says parents and guardians and patrons, if that's what we decide to do everywhere, so that it's clear. So yeah, it is definitely confusing, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Anything else? Anyone else? Go ahead, Brian.
No, I just want to thank prior boards. I mean, this policy was well-written. We can get back to the philosophical point of where we're at today. But we've had this in our policy for a long time. Parents have had those rights to choose whether or not they wanted their child to have the material, whether in required curriculum, in their classroom, or in the library. This policy existed well before today's time. And the biggest thing for me, and I'm glad we have not proposed any major overhauls to this, because what we've heard for the last 2 or 3 years was we want more parent rights. This policy does that for all groups on either side of controversial book issues. And so I'm glad that the subcommittee and the cabinet saw the strength that this policy has existed for years. And it gives everyone equal rights to either submit if they don't like a material, get an alternative material from their teachers. I know plenty of parents that I interact with that have had things that I don't quite like what they're reading. Simple conversations between principal and teacher, alternatives are provided. It happens all the time. So I'm very proud of this policy. I think it meets the needs of our community, and it gives the parent the right to decide what materials they can or can't or want their student to have access to. So it's the parent and the student, but I also think that all students, as we've stated, Ms. Wett, you stated, materials exist for different points of view. Everybody should be able to make the decision based on your family, your students' needs, to have that choice, and this policy's done that for many, many years. So I still stand by this policy. We need to have some further discussion, as noted, on our philosophical debate on who can utilize this policy as necessary. So look forward to further conversations.
Sorry, I have one more thing I just remembered. Ms. Siri, let's see, it is, laymen may present views on controversial subjects to a class through invitation from the teacher and principal. What exactly is that? Is that like any teacher can bring in whoever they want to their classroom to do a presentation? Is that what that means?
Where are you at, Brittany? Sorry.
Right.
Oh, I see it on the... Yeah, so it's talking about the materials, and it goes back to what Dr. Rickley was talking about earlier, how there are different levels. And a parent, basically it's saying that they can present views on even like critical, when your curriculum is built to teach kids how to think for themselves, not what to think. And so a lot of times, you know, it's like, for example, you'll read a piece of literature and it's not so much telling the kid what the literature says, but asking the kid, what do you think it says? And so it's all about that all sides are represented. And that's important with, so whether it be in a social studies classroom or an English classroom, it's that you're presenting multiple sides and letting students be critical thinkers with that information. And so this is basically deciding when an issue is considered controversial. It should be based on, and then it's outlining the 4 pieces, and then if there's an invitation from the teacher or principal. So in other words, just not anyone can go in and present on that. It's an invite.
Would that include, I'm thinking of a Holocaust survivor, might be called in to help understand survival. You know, those kinds of things. Would be a layperson who would come in and add value to the curriculum being taught.
Yeah, if the teacher invited them in,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because if somebody is coming into the child's classroom, is the parent aware that this person is coming in this day to talk about blah, blah, blah?
Depends on what it is, but most likely, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, any further discussion? All right, so I guess we need to figure out some more wording changes and bring it back to the board. Okay. All right, moving on to item B under discussion items, facility update and planning. Mr. Richards.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailey. I just wanted to give the board an update tonight on, you know, kind of our current projects out there. There's still a lot of them. We haven't talked about them in quite a while. We talk about them in subcommittee quite a bit, but the whole board and the community to hear kind of where our current projects are. The bigger ones are, of course, Liberty Middle Addition. That is well ahead of schedule, has been for the past 6 months. They've done a great job with that. We're doing some punch list items at this point. Rumsey Station is one that's a couple summer slams. It's a tight project. If you went over there today, I would tell you, you'd probably say there's no way in heck by August 1st that's going to be done. But it does come through. They got a plan. We got a good group of people working on that project, and we're confident that we're going to have that ready by the time school starts. La Vista West is completed. It's on punch lists at this point. PLHS, same thing, completed with punch lists. A little bit more punch lists at Monarch. We might be doing punch lists till 2025 on that one, but we're in good shape though. Irrigation systems, they've got started with the plumber and doing some things there. That will be completed by October 31st. We were hoping to get a little further this summer. We still may yet, but the contractor does have till October 31st to get that done. Playground resurfacing, that contract is due by August 31st. They're making good progress on that. We got set back a little bit last week with the rain, but it does take a 28-day cure once we get it all demoed out for those 5 schools on the playground, the old playground, and then we pour the cement. It's about 28 days before you can do the rubber surfacing. So we probably will be into school a little bit with a few of those projects, but we'll keep it safe for the kids.
Can I ask you a question on
Sure.
that? We've got school starting. How many of our playground resurfacing, how many playgrounds will be affected by not being ready and still be in process of curing and doing their thing? Because I'm assuming that means the kids can't be out there.
Correct.
So how many schools will we have? Do we expect that
If
might
I
be
had to
affected?
guess at this point, I would say 3. 3 of the 5 won't be ready by the time school starts.
So we have alternative plans in place for what they can.
Yeah, we have other playground areas they can play in. We'll keep it sealed off and
Thank you.
make sure that happens. Yeah, great question. And I'll keep you updated as we get closer to that as well. And then our last major projects on the board right now are the kitchen freezer projects at La Vista Middle and Papillion High School, Papillion La Vista High School. Those two, we ran into little problems with some piping that wasn't seen kind of behind the scenes. We had to raise that up. That took a couple weeks off the project, but we're confident we're going to have that ready both the freezers ready to go. Those are two major freezers for us, so the contractors understand and the architects the importance of getting that done here by August 1st. So that's kind of our current projects update. Just wanted to bring back the CMR process timeline. So some of these are a little more concrete now. The CMR proposals are due July 25th. We do have meetings set that works for all the selection committee members at this point, August 3rd and 10th. We're going to do that. So first meeting's kind of getting the notebooks, learning how to score. Our lawyer will be there to explain the process, how to score, those types of things. And then the 10th, we hope we're at the point where we can bring some companies back that we're really interested in for interviews to kind of get it down to the 2 at that point, and then recommend to the board on Monday, August 14th. If we need to add a meeting in there, we will, but that's kind of the process at this point. 2023 Bond Facility Improvement Fall Planning. I appreciate the subcommittee helping us through this, and I think we've heard along the way, and Annette with the community survey, when you do a bond like this, $130 million, you can't do it all at once. And we know there's a lot of priorities within this facility improvement project planning. What we heard through the community surveys, through staff meetings, all those things, was the 4 elementary schools and the 2 middle schools were probably the highest priorities project-wise to take on. That includes safety and security. So all of these include safety and security too. But we want to keep the safety and security moving as well. So I think looking at this, and this is for discussion tonight, and we tried to get both subcommittees involved in this discussion, so you had some time to think about it, that Hickory Hill, Terra Heights, Trumbull Park, Parkview Heights are on the design team from the architect's notice, and they've begun working on those things design-wise. And once we get the construction company involved, they'll help with that design. And those things take a long time to design. I wish we could just start moving dirt this summer after we pass the bond, believe me. But it takes a good 4 to 6 months to plan out these projects on each of them. These major ones I'm talking about. The Young Adult Transition Program building as well. La Vista Middle and Papillion Middle are quite extensive. They're going to take even longer than the 4 elementary schools to plan. But how do we keep safety and security moving as well? So the architects had some great ideas in this process as well as the Building, Grounds, and Finance Committee, that we maybe look at a 3-prong approach here to safety and security. We know that those 7 buildings up there have the safety and security designs for security film, playground, fencing, technology package all built into them. But how do we get at some of those other schools maybe off to the side? So we're looking at doing Walnut Creek, Portal, Patriot, and Bell this first year with security film and playground fencing. They're out of the way of other projects going on. Once we get the designs on what we're doing on the technology package, it'll be easy for us to do a quick design and get those out for bid from different companies that are already doing those other schools up top. So that's an idea we have. Safety and security technology package, maybe that's the 3rd prong. Ideal and 3 other schools. So Ideal we picked as kind of a pilot for this technology package for safety and security that Lucas and his team have come up with. Architects are very good at this stuff. They've been working with Millard on their technology or their safety and security packages as well, so they brought a lot of ideas to the table. So we're just trying to settle in on what that looks like, technology package. So the architecture group has a technology person that's worked on Millard, worked on other districts and safety and security. That's part of the conversation now with Lucas and the cabinet on what that technology package can look like. So we're trying to finalize that here in the next couple months. Put that out for Ideal, which we estimate to be about $18,000, $20,000, and test these things out. And then they go into the design for all those other schools, which will be real exciting for us to be able to do. And then we have some other projects that can work outside of this process that don't take up a lot of people's time, either with the construction management companies we hire or with our architects, and that is the high school baseball fields and softball fields. So there's kind of another area that we can take on during this first year. Baseball fields, for example, the engineers design almost exclusively. So they're not working with BCDM a whole lot on that because they've done dozens of them in the communities. That's Lampert Earson. So baseball, we have a time frame. Legion ball ends in a couple weeks. We can jump on and get the baseball fields done this fall. Softball starts up in July here, so at the end of this month, so we can't really do those fields until they're done with their season. So we'd hope to do the softball fields right as it thaws next March would be the plan. So we got a lot of things going here. We want to make people proud of passing this bond, get as many projects as we can do in the first year going, and yet make it sustainable and doing it well with the team that we have. And I think we can do that. The architects feel confident in this approach. And we hope the construction managers feel the same way when they get on. We've talked to a few different companies on the side to see if this is even practical for them to do, these larger companies, and they can do them, we think. So we would recommend this approach and continue that discussion, knowing that it's got to be flexible, these timelines and these projects, knowing that they got to be flexible once we get the team on board. There's lead times of equipment and supply and demand issues in all these projects as well. So we'll do our best. We want to be done with this in 4 years is the goal from this summer. And that's what our kind of preliminary projects look at. That may get pushed back a little bit, depending on lead times, construction problems, those types of things that can come up through the process. But we're excited to get going, I can tell you that much. And I know you are too, visiting with all of you. Any comments, discussion, questions?
I have one question. I have one question about the bid process. I see that they're kind of staggered.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any benefit to bidding them at one time so that you can identify materials and workforce that would be working on the same thing in other locations?
And that will be real helpful once we get the construction companies on board to help us answer some of that. Right now, I mean, with our experience with the architects that we have, they would advise to stagger. So you're not bidding against yourself on all these projects with subcontractors that can't handle that much work all at once. So they prefer to stagger, but you know, that could change once the construction companies get on board for sure.
I had a question. Back to the 2018 bond list. It seems like you've been giving us updates, and I've constantly seen punch list. Are we coming up with new punch list items, or are they just taking a long time, or what's? Because like I said, that's all I've seen, and it seems like okay.
Yeah. You know, for these huge projects, 24 million over at Monarch. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you catch. Yeah. You know, that you do walk-arounds one time and you don't see it, and then the next time you see it coming through. So that's more where we're at now, Skip, is kind of seeing things that are coming up. And, you know, they've done a good job. They've been I will say, they've been reactive to our punch lists, and they're really trying to get out. They want out of there as much as we want them out of there at this point. So I would say it's coming in pretty quick at Monarch.
I just wondered. I mean, I don't want to miss something and then come back later and go, oh shoot, we missed that. But the second thing I wanted to say, you know, with the whole list and how we have all these dates, and I know, you know, I've gotten comments, emails, and everything, and people are asking. You know, the one thing we don't want to do is to rush this process. We want to make sure we do it right, because way too often it seems like I'm, you know, driving around and seeing sidewalks being redone and things where I think they may have rushed it and not done it the right way. And obviously we want to be good stewards of this money that we have, that has been, you know, granted to us through the vote, and to be able to do it the right way first, so we don't have to come back 4 years later and ask to redo something because we didn't take our time. So I appreciate the fact that you're, you know, talking to these architects, and once we figure out who the companies will be that will actually, you know, use them and come up with the right resources and the good resources and everything. So I do appreciate that. I know, you're right. We all want to get going and get these schools built, but we need to do it the right way. So I appreciate what you and the subcommittee are undertaking right now.
I appreciate those comments. And if there's a time when we feel like we're rushing too much, we'll have a good team there with the committee and architects and then the construction companies to say, hey, we got to cool it and slow down a little bit, and we'll respect that and do those things.
Just with the punch list, I remember at the meeting you said that you guys were doing the walk around and you just seen like paint chipped or missing, so like little stuff like that. And then with the baseball fields, with the turfing, I just wanted to share how you told us that the coaches are really involved with that and planning and how they want it to look, which I think is pretty awesome since they're out there all the time.
Yeah, they're excited. The coaches have been involved. The Legion's been involved in the planning of those facilities, and we'll be presenting those to you, we hope, at the July 24th meeting for kind of the kickoff for those projects. So we'll be able to share that with the whole board and community at that time.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, thank you very much. Move on to our last discussion item, item C, the review of policy 7000, construction. Mr. Richards.
Yes, and we will be reviewing those, and the Buildings, Grounds, and Finance Committee will take a look at that on August 4th at our next meeting as well. So if you have any comments or things that you see in the meantime, let us know, and we'll take a look at them here over the next month.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. Item 5, the future board calendar. One thing we have on there, July 24th will be our next Board of Education meeting right here at 6 o'clock. It sounds like we've got some rain that's either started or coming, so please be careful out there as everybody is headed out. Pray for no hail, and unless we have any other business, I will adjourn the meeting at 7:51 p.m. Thank you very much.